This week's lecture and lesson will focus on cultural diversity and supervision, ethical dilemmas, and group supervision. The bulk of the lecture will be on cultural diversity and supervision because of its significance and its importance with respect to working with diverse workforce in the criminal justice, juvenile justice field as it is in the workforce in America today. Revisiting the earlier chapter regarding Kadushin and Harkness, when they talked about stressors, one of the ongoing supervisor stress that they talked about is the challenge of the human diversity. Race and ethnicity is a factor in supervision. Gender is a factor in transition to supervision. Gender is a factor in ongoing supervision. And sexual harassment a problem for supervision. In a discussion regarding race and ethnicity as a factor in supervision, Kadushin and Harkness talk about the white supervisor and the African American supervisee, the African American supervisor and the white supervisee, and the African American supervisor and the African American supervisee. They discuss specific issues as it relates to what happens in the workforce in these kinds of situations. Most frequently, the cross-cultural pattern is that of a white supervisor and an African American supervisee. And one needs to really understand and know and be sensitive to the fact that the supervisee is a member of a victimized group and may be vigilant and cautiously checking the speech and nonverbal reactions of the hints of prejudice that may disclose subtly or openly with respect to the supervisor. The fact of race can never be ignored, nor should it be overemphasized. So the supervisor needs to be sensitive to that supervisee and working with them and holding them equally as accountable as they will for others and not having higher or lower expectations of that particular worker. And making sure and making checks on their particular biases as they may or may not be. So Kadushin and Harkness give an interesting discussion regarding this in their narrative. Less frequently is the situation of the African American supervisor and the white supervisee. And this is much less frequent. And issues do arise with respect to the white supervisee and their perception of the African American supervisor as to that individual's position, how they may have obtained the position, and some negative stereotyping that occurs in these particular kinds of situations, which is discussed with respect to what Kadushin and Harkness talk about in their readings and in their writing, which is of importance. Then we have the situation of the African American supervisor and the African American supervisee, and what actually occurs there, where the subordinate may think of the supervisor as a brother or sister, and some role confusions and expectations as it relates to what is occurring with respect to situations and the supervisor's connectedness to the agency and to the organization, and perhaps some mixed messages that may occur in that process. All of that needs to be significantly adhered to and understood in terms of what's going on. The point is that race and ethnicity is a significant factor in supervision, and it could be a white supervisor with a minority of another ethnic, racial minority. It doesn't have to be white supervisor and African American. It could be white supervisor and Hispanic American, Native American, or what have you, in terms of the multiple different combinations that may occur. Kadushin and Harkness also talk about gender as a factor in transition to supervision. Social work is characterized as a female profession, where 83% of the social workers are women. I think you might find a similar trend, or maybe a less high trend in the criminal or juvenile justice profession, but depending upon the agency and the emphasis of how they promote, it can be, a factor of importance or significance. Then we have gender as a factor of ongoing supervision. Differences in gender between supervisor and supervisee can present some problems and issues of transference and how one works with one another, and how sensitive they are or may not be with respect to the conscious awareness of some of these factors and the influence of these factors. The female supervisor, for example, could provide the male supervisee with a consciousness-raising learning situation regarding women experiences. And for men working with the female supervisor, oftentimes this may be the first time in their adult life, except in their relationship with parents, where they were presented with a woman in the position of authority. All right, and they need to understand and know what's going on. And then we have the male supervisor, who may act in a traditionally courtly or protective manner towards female supervisees, being careful to avoid hurting them or being critical or even criticizing when criticism is appropriate in terms of what needs to go happen there. Some other interesting dynamics that Condition and Harkness discuss that we need to be aware of. So the point is that the relationship between supervisor and supervisee established over time may be more significant than factors of ethnicity, gender, or race, but we need to be sensitive to these issues. And then they talk about sexual harassment, a problem for supervision. Sexual harassment is a form of gender discrimination with grave human and institutional costs, and agencies need to be very sensitive to that. Male supervisors working with female workers or vice versa need to be very sensitive in terms of their communication with one another, and innuendos, and the position of power, or how they use their power over workers with making unwanted sexual comments or advances. And agencies have policies and procedures that should have policies and procedures that significantly address these sexual harassment issues in these areas, where the subordinate may, if they have an issue, and if it's one with their supervisor dealing with sexual harassment, they can go directly to human resources and bypass their supervisor in addressing those particular issues. The other points that I think need to be made here is that it may not always be male-female, it could be female-male, and it also can pose a hostile work environment as well that we need to be very careful about.